The biggest financial risk I ever did was Cats in London, because nobody thought that could remotely be a success.
Broadway is all about risk-taking, but lately, those risks don't seem to be paying off.
The new writers really can't afford to work on Broadway anymore. I mean, it's got out of control, and it's got to tip back now in favor of the creatives.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, the legendary composer, thinks that if things don't improve soon, the future of the business could be at risk. Or at least the future of producing musicals on Broadway. What will it take to change this? Let's break down the business of Broadway.
You can't just keep relying on the old things. And we need the new work. And we need the new Hamilton. We need the new Lion King. We need the new Wicked. I mean, we want to see a brand new musical written for Broadway on Broadway.
Andrew Lloyd Webber is the most successful Broadway composer ever. His most famous works include The Phantom of the Opera, Cats, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Evita. And the new Broadway staging of his Sunset Boulevard won the Tony for Best Revival this year. His latest show, Masquerade, is running off-Broadway, and it reimagines Phantom of the Opera. Phantom was Broadway's longest-running show of all time, and might have even gone on longer.
Idiotically, the Phantom was allowed to close in New York, which I think was probably the stupidest decision anybody ever took, because it had found a new audience and it was breaking through to a young audience again.
Hamilton is in its 10th year on Broadway and going strong, but many original musicals have ended their runs earlier than expected in the last few years. The math, it just hasn't been working out. It costs so much to put them on.
The cost of production are just cripplingly high.
The price of premium tickets has gone up, and attendance is still down from pre-pandemic levels. Only about 10% of shows turn a profit, according to data. That's half the historical average. So why is it so difficult to produce new work on Broadway now and recoup your investment?
I think it's going to be very difficult for people to really produce major new work on Broadway now. What's happened is that the balance between what the theatre owners and the unions are taking out of everything, and particularly I'm going to say the theatre owners, and I'm a theatre owner myself, it's tipped so hugely now in that favour. And so long as there have been shows and people prepared to go and prepared to take the deals that the theatre owners have made, nobody has really done anything about it. And now the scale is that, a new writer, or even an established writer now, are on minimums. I mean, which in some cases mean that the new writers really can't afford to work on Broadway anymore. I mean, it's got out of control, and it's got to tip back now in favor of the creatives.
Lloyd Webber says he isn't directly producing his shows these days. He's focused on composing. His production and licensing company recently rebranded itself as LW Entertainment. It's looking at various ways to develop his catalog across different media, including films and even young adult novels. But producers are key to a show's success. They're typically involved in the creative direction, but they're heavily focused on raising money. Broadway musicals can cost more than $20 million to produce. Before a show opens, there's set construction, and with the prices of steel and lumber up, set costs have risen. After a premiere, the biggest expenses for producers include payroll for the cast, crew, and the creative team, and don't forget rent for the theater. To save on these costs, musicals are typically developed and launched in another market, either somewhere in the US or in London. This is kind of like a trial run before producers pay the substantial rent that Broadway theater owners charge.
I can't think of a new musical that has come into Broadway which hasn't actually been produced somewhere else. What I'm concerned about, and do understand this is because of my love for Broadway, is that people are going to bypass it. Young people now are wanting theatre in totally different ways. I mean, my Starlight Express is in Wembley, which is on the northwest of London by where Wembley Stadium is. I mean, it's equivalent of being in somewhere in Long Island or the Bronx. I run my theatres on the basis that every penny of profit we make goes back into the buildings. I've had such, luck in my career, and the career of the thing that I love. I absolutely believe that my moral responsibility is to keep those theatres going. I believe also that theatre really only needs 4 walls, a roof, and flexible seating. And if you've got a building that can then fly a bit or light properly and all of that, I don't believe that people now feel that they have to come to the West End or Broadway. I think the young now feel they'll just go where they want. We're all going to have to now think about new ways of doing things. Going back to Jesus Christ Superstar all those years ago, I loved the idea of something breaking the boundaries. Theatre is not just about going to an old proscenium theatre. It's important that it moves into the 21st century.
Broadway is also a highly unionized industry, and those union agreements impact the costs of creating a show and keeping it running. Shows like Cats and Phantom of the Opera were successful in a different time, but they had things going for them that still make a difference today. Innovative staging, stunning effects like the chandelier crashing down in Phantom, songs that became hits, and big-budget marketing efforts. Cats was particularly risk-taking.
The biggest financial risk I ever did was Cats in London. Nobody thought that could remotely be a success. I was working with Cameron Mackintosh, who was at that time not an established producer. I was working without Tim Rice, who had had my successes with before, with the poems of T.S. Eliot, who was a dead American poet. I was asking the British, who are supposed not to be able to dance, or they won't be able to dance in theirs, to be in a dance show dressed as cats with the director of the Royal Shakespeare Company, who wouldn't have known about musicals, Trevor Nunn. We did have Gillian Lynn, who was a well-known choreographer, but that was about it. Going into the theatre that Grease had failed in, with Richard Gere in the lead. And everybody said, mad. And I had to have a second mortgage on my house to guarantee the show to go into that building. And if it had been a disaster, I'd have lost my house.
Even though his big gamble on Cats paid off, Lloyd Webber isn't as much interested in the backstage or production side of theatre these days.
I think it's rather like some advice that somebody gave me years ago, which was never really to invest in your own shows. I started to get involved with production because, well, I was quite interested in producing other people's things. But really because I was worried about keeping up the standards of my own shows. I started my own little company. So that was really where it all came from. But I really do think, and I learnt the hard way, that producing one's own shows is not a good idea.
Lloyd Webber's latest show, Masquerade, is running off Broadway. It's a reimagining of Phantom of the Opera where different groups of audience members cycle through a set and singers sing directly to them, often just standing a few feet away. Audiences have been loving it, especially fans of Phantom and immersive experiences like Sleep No More.
I'm thrilled with it. I mean, it came about because I'd seen Sleep No More, which I saw the potential of what one could do. And do you know what? I just thought, come on, why don't we try and do an immersive version of the Phantom? I think the really exciting thing about it is that you're hearing singers singing live to you closer than really I am to this cup here half the time. And it is a completely new experience, I think. I mean, I remember the first time I saw it completely through, and we were in a tiny little room, and there's a section of the show which has always been very personal to me, because I remember how it was written and where, which is the little section where Christine sings "Twisted Every Way, What Answer Can I Give?" And the girl sang it like there to me, and that was the most extraordinary moment I think I have had in my career. I mean, having a really great girl sing to you beautifully that piece of music did it for me. I mean, it's got everything else. It's got the chandelier, it's got the lot, it does everything. But for me, it was just that intimate moment which made me think this is a kind of theatre I'd not seen before. And I'd never, ever heard a work of mine done like that so close. And I found that's what I found people being more moved by this than even they maybe have been in the stage show.
What would it take to bring audiences back and keep Broadway going in the next few decades?
what it's going to take is the possibility that economically somebody can produce something on Broadway which is original. So long as now investors are beginning to say it's just not worth the while doing anything on Broadway. You're always going to get the odd investor who's going to say, oh, do you know what? Because now if you put money into a show, you could go above the titles as a producer and therefore technically win a Tony Award. You're going to get people who say, oh, I would love to be able to stand on the stage at the Tony Awards or something, with Best Musical or Best Revival or whatever. But that's not the answer. Well, it's great to have people coming and investing shows and angels like used to be the case, but you've got to be able to give people a return. And that means that, everything in the economics of Broadway got to change. And therefore, new work can happen.